the National Association of Black Journalists annual convention is underway in Chicago, and Donald Trump will be there answering questions from reporters there, which is creating some controversy. We've got our person on the ground there, our very own Sarah Seidner, at the convention with the latest, and this is becoming something of a thing, Sarah.
It is. There's controversy being whipped up here in the Windy City because of what has happened here. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris were both actually invited to this before Biden dropped out of the race. But it was only Donald Trump who accepted to come in person. Kamala Harris, according to NABJ, could not schedule this. She had too tight of a schedule and was unable to do it virtually either. They are still trying to work that out. The controversy, of course, surrounding the fact that Kamala Harris, if she were to become president, would be the first Black American female president of the United States, and her not being here instead of Donald Trump, who has had a lot to say about Black Americans and this particular city, and the way he has treated, for example, Black reporters, has been somewhat of a controversy here. But this is something that NABJ does every single time it has its conference. They always invite the presumptive nominees for president to come and speak. They've been doing so since 1976. And I want to let you hear from the president of NABJ, who talked about the controversy. This has caused some of the, for example, a board member to leave the organization, saying that she will no longer be on the board, partly because of this and a few other issues. But here's what he had to say about the controversy as to letting Donald Trump speak when they do not have the other presumptive nominee.
It is our jobs as journalists to have those uncomfortable conversations so that the people who count on us to inform them get the information from the source. And I hope, as a journalism organization, National Association of Black Journalists, we take that portion seriously.
His point is, look, this could be the president, the 47th president of the United States, and it deserves some time for the journalists here to be able to question him. There will be several journalists on the panel asking him questions from several different organizations. But there is a concern already because Donald Trump has already started to try to use this as he is trying to garner more Black votes. Some of the Black population has voted for Donald Trump more than in the past. And here's a little bit of what he put out. He said President Trump accomplished more for Black Americans than any other president in recent history. That is, of course, disputable. He talks about, for example, unemployment when it comes to Black Americans. And during his administration, it was true that unemployment was lower for Black Americans than it was previously. But the Biden administration has seen an even lower number of unemployment for Black Americans. So there will be a lot of fact checking that is expected on the stage live as it happens. It will be published on NABJ's website and elsewhere. I do want to let you know there will also be a protest that is planned here. We're not sure how large, but there is going to be a protest outside of the hotel where Donald Trump will be speaking to journalists.
And joining us now is CNN political commentator Jamal Simmons. He was Vice President Harris's communications director. Hi, Jamal. Thanks for coming on. So Trump is wavering on whether he'll debate Harris. He previously said he was willing to debate Joe Biden anytime, any place, anywhere. What has changed?
Well, what's changed is I think Trump thought after the Supreme Court rulings on immunization and or immunity rather, and then the Eileen Cannon's rulings on the cases down in Florida, that maybe he was going to avoid having to go back in front of another judge or prosecutor. But if he sits on a debate stage with Kamala Harris, that's really facing a prosecutor for 90 minutes on the biggest stage America is going to have, this big courtroom of a debate. And so I don't know that he really wants to do that. If I'm his campaign, I'm thinking twice about it. The problem is he gets called the chicken, basically. And I think that's what he's trying to avoid.
So Harris, for her part, drew in a huge diverse crowd in Atlanta last night. There is new polling out consistently showing Harris outperforming Biden with Black voters. But our CNN's Ryan Young spoke with some Black male voters who said they didn't feel like she is speaking directly to them. What more does she need to do, you think?
You know, before she got picked, she had been spending time traveling around the country doing an economic tour, particularly thinking about African-American men and how to talk to African-American men about their financial future. So when I think about her economic policy, What she's been talking about is wealth and wages, right? How do we get people more wealth, start more businesses, community development, financial institutions, these CDFIs that are kind of an arcane language. But really, how do we get people more wealth? And how do we make sure they get more wages? We've seen wages grow over the course of the Biden-Harris administration. She's also talked about health care and child care, because one of the things for families today that matters is that if you're sick, if your parents are sick, your kids are sick, it's hard for you to work. You can't get that extra shift. Also, if you don't have child care, you can't afford child care. If you're trying to start a company, if you're trying to get an extra shift at work, if you can't figure out how to get your kid taken care of after 3 o'clock, that is a direct impact on how much money you can make. So I think her talking directly about these issues to voters is really going to matter as she goes across these states.
I also want to ask you about this NABJ controversy. This is a conference with black journalists where Trump is delivering a speech, but Harris is not. Of course, there's been a lot of blowback about Trump being there. Harris's team initially said she had scheduling conflicts. She does have a funeral today, but is now trying to figure something out virtually. What do you make of that fact? As her comms director, do you think that she should be there?
Well, I'm her former comms director. So
I mean, sure. If you were her comms director.
Yes, for sure.
If you were.
Yeah. Listen, I think she's talking to journalists all the time, talking to African-American journalists all the time. Look, I think what's happening right now is this is a real time crunch. 2 weeks ago, she was not the Democratic nominee or prospective Democratic nominee for president. So right now, they don't even have email addresses, right? The email addresses are still joebiden.com. They've got to figure a lot of things out. She's got to pick out a candidate, pick out a running mate. She's got to make sure that all the talking points work. She's got to figure out her travel schedule. I can't imagine the number of things they're trying to balance right now. And so I imagine when they start looking at the schedule, something's got to give. Because the one thing you can't make more of in the midst of a campaign is the candidate's time. Right? You can raise more money, you can hire more staff, you can get more lawn signs. You can't get more time on the calendar, on the candidate's schedule. So they've got to figure out how to use that time most efficiently. And that's probably, frankly, a place where this NABJ conference, traveling to that conference, just took a hit. And instead, they're trying to figure out a way for her to do it and still manage all the other things that are on her schedule.
I'm wondering also, as her former comms director, what you think about the strategy as it pertains to immigration. Of course, initially the campaign had been trying to sort of distance itself from immigration and her task for Biden to figure out the origins and tamp down on it. But now she's sort of confronting it head on and going on offense with immigration and putting it back on Trump, saying that he was the one who interfered with passing that bipartisan legislation on immigration. What do you think about that tactic?
Yeah, they posted a pretty good ad about that goes at Trump directly for standing in the way of the bipartisan immigration law. You know, she was tasked to deal with sort of the migration issues, the roots of migration from 3 Central American countries in particular. And what we found out is that over the course of her getting private sector involved down there and making sure they're focused on the economy and violence, now we've seen a drop of 200,000 arrests at the border from people from those countries. So she had an impact when it came to the questions that she was asked to pursue from the president. But the fact is, the Republicans were on the verge of actually helping to pass a bill that would do something about this, and Donald Trump said no because he thought it would help him politically. He ought to take the weight for that. If they're going to make those kind of political decisions and not do the things that are in favor of the American public, they should pay the political price for it.
Jamal, thank you very much for coming on and offering your perspective and opinions.
Thanks for having me. See you soon.